Hello everybody and welcome back to my Word of Mouth English Studio channel. My name is Lisa and I'm the founder and CELTA certified tutor here at Word of Mouth English Studio, where we train academic students for Cambridge exam certification. We also give general English, business English and technical writing courses. In today's video tutorial, we will be discussing some commonly made English mistakes in terms of grammar and structure. Let's have a look at these mistakes together and determine which of these mistakes you are most commonly making and why you're making them. And we'll also talk about how to correct these errors. Have you ever thought too long about what word to use? Have you ever thought you were using the wrong verb or the wrong part of speech? Have you been misinterpreted in emailing communication or in a conversation before? If the answer is yes, then you might be using the wrong word in the right context. Let's have a look at some common English grammar mistakes, and in particular we'll be looking at ones that are most popular with B1 and B2 intermediate students. These grammar mistakes could be ones that you make on a regular basis in English, and you might not even know that they're grammatically incorrect or that they're structurally incorrect or unnatural. Let's find them together. Have a look at this image first of all and try to detect the very popular grammar error here. Right, the grammar error has to do with the word agree. Therefore, agree is the main culprit here. And believe it or not, many people think this sentence is correct. They usually make the mistake of saying, I am agree, when they want to express agreement. But the thing is, this is not the right word to use. Agree is a verb, but it is not an adjective. Therefore, it is not I am agree, but rather I agree. Agree is a verb. Right, so that's just one of the many commonly made mistakes at B1 and B2 level. So if you want to avoid typical errors and if you want to sharpen up your English skills, let's have a look at the list below and detect the most commonly made mistakes in English so that you could avoid them in future. And the first one's ready for us right here. Right, I am agree is in fact wrong. Agree is a verb and is never used as an adjective. Therefore, we never put the verb to be in front of it. So that is the very first item on our list. That's how popular it is. The second error has to do with verb form and verb tense in particular. But people make mistakes in the present and the past when it comes to said and told, but mostly it's the type of verb being used that they make mistakes with. Have a look at this one. I said you something. Said is the wrong verb here. The student or the speaker should not have used the verb said. Why? Because the verbs say and tell often mean the same thing, but are used in different ways. They have different structures. And therefore, this is how we should be saying it. I told you something. I told you to turn off the lights before leaving the office. We don't say, I said you to turn off the lights. Why is this? It's because you, as a pronoun, can never be used directly after the verb say or said. Rather, you, as a pronoun, can be used directly after the verb tell or told. So therefore, you tell somebody something and you say something to somebody. Right, so now we're starting to think, this is the way it works. This is the right answer. Think about the verbs you use today. Another popular correction is with tell again, once again, is this. Mike told that. Mike told that or Mike tells that is wrong. Rather, Mike tells me that you're doing well. Or Mike told us that you're doing well. So in this case, what's wrong? What's going on here? The verb tell cannot be used directly. That cannot be used directly after the word tell. Rather, there needs to be a pronoun directly after the word tell or told before we can use that in reported speech. So think about reported speech versus direct speech. He said with open and closed quotes. However, when we use tell, we're usually reporting back to somebody what somebody said. So think of the structure you need to use. Right, now we go on to conditional sentences. If I will. Right, this is very, very commonly made and it is wrong. It is not correct. Let's see why. If I will go, I will tell you is not correct because the word will can never be used in the subjunctive clause. In other words, it cannot be used together with if in the same clause. If it is used, and it should be used, it goes in the result clause, following a comma, for example. If I will go, comma, is not correct. But if I go, comma, I will tell you is correct. As you can see, will goes in the following clause, not in the if clause. Now moving on to another conditional mistake, or a mistake with conditional clauses. And here we go, would. Would is used in exactly the same way as will is. In other words, would is used in the second clause of the conditional and not the if clause. In other words, use will and would in the result clause and never in the if clause. Moving on now to another error, having to do with conditionals again, but this time we're going contrary to past reality rather than going contrary to present reality. And we're using would in the past tense, but look how we should use it and look how it's used incorrectly. If I would have gone to university, I would have learned something is not correct. Again, would should always go in the result clause. That means following the comma in this case. Right, in other words, if I had gone to university, I would have learned something. This is correct. This is the sentence the speaker wanted to use. If I had gone to university, comma, I would have learned. So what's going on here? Instead of using would have gone, we're using the past perfect, had gone. Because had gone, or the past perfect, is used to go contrary to past reality in a conditional clause. There you go. And now moving on to the next popular error this one has to do with prepositional use. Right, so do we say this is a present to you, or do we say this is a present for you? Right, so according to grammar conventions, okay, a present for somebody is correct. This is a present for you, and not this is a present to you. Right, think about how we use prepositions, and do we tend to use prepositions correctly most of the time? Similarly, the word by is very, very particular. Again, we use certain verbs with certain prepositions. Okay, these are called collocations and they need to be memorized. You buy somebody a gift, or you buy a gift for somebody, but you do not buy a gift to somebody. So think about prepositions for and to, because they're very commonly confused, and I've seen many of these errors in both writing conventions as well as speaking. So think of the mistakes that you ordinarily make. The next and very popular mistake again has to do with, once again, at or in or to. Basically, these are all mistakes to do with prepositions. Which preposition should we use in what context? Do we say, let's have a coffee to that cafe? Or do we say, let's have a coffee at that cafe or in that cafe. So think about the prepositions that should be used here and what the difference is between them, because there is a difference. Having a coffee to somewhere, it just does not exist. It does not make sense to an English speaker. However, let's have coffee at that cafe, especially if they have outdoor seating, is appropriate. However, using in would also be appropriate if this was a three-dimensional space you were trying to imply. In other words, is this an indoor space? Has this got an outdoor space as well? And are we talking about the institution or are we talking about the building? There are differences between I work in a hospital and I am at hospital. One of those means that you work as part of the institution, whereas the other, in, means that you are in the building physically. Moving on to other types of errors made at this learning stage is the word raise versus rise. Now, what is the difference between these two? Well, the only difference is the style of word they are. One is an intransitive verb, whereas the other is transitive. Remember, these two types of verbs are different. Raise and rise are both infinitives, but the past simple of these verbs are different, and this is where students tend to get them confused. Rose is the past simple of rise, whereas raised is the past simple of raise. Therefore, they cannot be used in the same way, as rise means to go up. Therefore, we can say taxes rose by 5%. But to raise means to make something go up. So this is not an automatic action, right? If you say the government raised taxes by 5%, whereas taxes rose by 5% is a more natural action. It doesn't need that object to function in a sentence. So taxes were raised by 5% is not correct. We do not need to use the passive here, and we do not need to use the transitive verb here because of the word taxes. Rather, we say taxes rose by 5% if you want to use the past simple. Okay, so in that case, make sure you know the difference between to raise something and to rise. One needs an object in which to function, whereas the other doesn't. And there are many types of transitive and intransitive verbs of this type. Right, let's move on to another very commonly made error. When introducing yourself to somebody and giving a little information on your background, do you say, I am living here since a year? Do you say, I am living here during 1 year? Or do you say, I have been living here for a year? And what's the difference? Well, in English we use the present perfect or the present perfect continuous to talk about experience, to talk about duration. And that is what the author is trying to say here. I have been living here for 1 year is correct because for is used directly with the present perfect or the present perfect continuous. And so is since. Since and for are both used with the present perfect tenses. However, during isn't. You can say, he slept during the film, but you can't say, I am living here since during a year. And you cannot say, I am living here during a period. You cannot use the present continuous to do this. Use the present perfect to transition from past to present, to relate experience, to talk about time duration. Okay, now we move on to error, another error. When you're introducing somebody, do you say, this is the girl who she lives in Brazil? Or do you say, this is the girl who lives in Brazil? And what's the difference? Well, who is a relative pronoun, which means that we use relative pronouns to avoid repetition. And this is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to avoid repetition or repetitious use of the subject. Therefore, it's not necessary to repeat this subject again, who she lives, right? A girl lives, right? She refers to the subject. Excellent. Now moving on to the next error. This is very common. Did you notice whether you've made any of these? Do you tend to make some more than others? Let's have a look at this grammar error. What do you do tonight versus what are you doing tonight, which is the correct version. What do you do is the present simple. The present simple tense is used to explain routine, to talk about schedule, or to talk about scientific facts, mathematical facts, physical, geographical, social facts. Right, if it's not a fact, then maybe it's routine. If it's not a fact and it's not a routine and it's not schedule, then you shouldn't be using the present simple. As simple as that. You should be using the future continuous or the present continuous. In this case, we are talking about the future. This person is making a future plan or is asking about a future intention. Therefore, we need to use the present continuous. What are you doing tonight? Not what will you do tonight, but use the present continuous for future plans and for future intentions. That's the rule. The answer to that would be, tonight I go to the pub. Really? Tonight I will go, tonight I go. Neither of these sentences is quite natural in English. Therefore, it's wrong. Tonight I'm going to the pub is correct because just like the question here used the continuous form to talk about future intentions or plans, then so should the answer. There should be an agreement between the question and the answer. And there you go. I'm going to the pub is right. The next commonly made error is go shopping. Right. Do we say I'm going to shopping? That is not correct. Shopping is a verb, and therefore we need to be using the gerund, very good. But why say to shopping if shopping is not a destination? Maybe you mean the shops. I'm going to the shops. Then you can use the preposition to talk about destination, to talk about direction. But if you're not talking about the noun, then you shouldn't be using the word shopping, you should be using the word shop. Okay, if you want to use the noun. If not, use the verb. I go shopping, I go running. So, the next exercise, the next example here has to do with quantifiers, right? Almost people in my country. This is not correct because the quantifier that the speaker is using here does not exist. So therefore, it cannot be used. So what alternatives are there instead? Most of the people in my country would be a good way to say this instead. Or most people in my country, which would be a good substitute and would mean exactly the same thing as most of the people in my country. Or another substitute for this, and I think, I reckon this is what the original speaker was trying to say. He or she was trying to imply that almost all of the people in his or her country did this. So, that's the difference between most of the people, and almost of the people. Okay? Right, you can use either one. Right, so most of the people in my country means the majority. Most people in my country also means the majority. Almost all the people means the vast majority and almost the whole, if you want to refer to the whole as being 100%. It's not the whole, but it's the closest to the whole it can get. How about the expression most of people? This is another commonly made mistake. Most of people is not correct either, okay? So either most followed by of, followed by the definite article, followed by people, all right? Or most followed by people. Right, and finally, I explain you something is not correct. I describe something, yes. I explain something, yes, but not I explain to you. I'll explain something to you. So think about the verbs and think about whether they need a pronoun or whether they could do without the pronoun. In this case, delete the pronoun. Let me explain something. I will explain it to you. Let's explain something to you. I explained this to Mike. Right, so hopefully this lesson has given you a little insight into the examples of very commonly made mistakes that many B1 and B2 students make in English. And hopefully you've detected some of the expressions that you also tend to make mistakes in yourself. Now you know you can correct them, and it's easy. So take a note of what you learned today, and if you would like to take lessons or book a course, then register at www.wormslearnenglish.com. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial today, and if you enjoyed the tutorial, kindly subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time in one of my other videos.